Paper 2, question 3. You're not quite there yet? Mamma mia. Schofield on Shakespeare.
Here's the question and extract we are going to use in this video. It is taken from the November 2021 paper 2 past paper, and I would recommend downloading at least the insert, possibly the question paper as well. So press pause to read the extract now, and the video will resume in 5 seconds time. I probed the mark scheme in mind-bogglingly tedious detail in other videos, but it goes without saying that you should know the top band off by heart. Press pause if you'd like to review this briefly.
To scrutinise a paragraph from a past pupil.
This pupil writes, Fanny's house is shown to be much more respectable than the other houses on her street, and the author uses contrasting images in order to stress this idea. For example, the author uses personification when comparing some of the decrepit houses on the street with Fanny's house. Some of the houses are described as being derelict, with rags of ancient curtains hanging at the toothy mouths of their broken windows. First of all, the use of a hyperbole seen in the word ancient further perpetuates the idea of degeneration and old age seen in the first paragraph. Most of the houses on Crook Street are said to be old. They were once very fine and fashionable, now receding into shabby gentility. This remains the case in the description of these derelict houses. The writer describes the houses as having toothy mouths, which are seen to be broken windows. The use of personification further creates images of decay with sinister undertones, as it is as if the houses are smiling at passers-by with big toothy grins. There is something unearthing about this idea, which adds to the sense of decay. What do you make of this response? Discuss in class or independently. It's pause time. Well, it starts decently, doesn't it? With a topic sentence which focuses on the question. The question asks us to look at how language and structure are used to present Fanny's house as unusual. And this pupil points out that Fanny's house is unusually respectable in relation to the other houses on the street. You can also see subject terminology being used accurately within the second sentence. Personification is indeed used when describing some houses as having ancient curtains hanging at the toothy mouths of their broken windows. However, let's look very carefully at the quotations used in this paragraph before referring to the original passage. They are taken from lines 3 to 5. Can you see the problem? Whoopsie! So, with the exception of the first sentence, none of this can be credited or given marks. If you wanted to make a similar point, but refer to the correct section, you might have written something like this. Fanny's house is shown to be far cleaner and brighter than the other houses on her street, in spite of the fact that it is built of the same soot-grimed London stone. There are bright, heavy curtains and pots of geraniums on all the sills. The adjective bright suggests that the curtains are vividly coloured or exude light, which may be unexpected given the fact that the exterior of the property is stained with black, polluting particles, something negative as emphasised by the hissing, sibilant sounds. The fact that every possible ledge is filled with bright flowers also results in an unexpectedly positive impression of the house. Meanwhile, the very structure of the paragraph draws attention to the unusual nature of Fanny's property. Wedged in between two long, complex sentences is a simple sentence. In that neighbourhood, the house stood out. This very short sentence stands out within the paragraph and emphasises the fact that Fanny's house is a refreshing breath of fresh air and simplicity within a dirty, cluttered street. Firstly, a quick triple check that my quotations come from the right section. Happy days. A few other points to make. Note that I go into plenty of detail when exploring the effects of the adjective bright. Remember that I need to show a sophisticated appreciation of how the writer has used language to achieve effects. However, unlike in the original, I also talk about the way the paragraph is structured. Just as Fanny's house stands out amidst the grimy muck, so the simple sentence stands out within a paragraph containing two much longer, complex sentences.
Now it's time to look at a second past pupil paragraph.
This pupil writes, in the first paragraph, we get a description of the neighbourhood surrounding Fanny's house. Number of old houses, once very fine and fashionable, now receding into shabby gentility. This provides a backdrop for the description of the house itself, which is described as respectably clean despite being built of the same soot-grimed London stone. This visual contrast distinguishes the house from the rest of the neighbourhood, but what is even more unusual is the entrance to the house. The entrance is described as having bright, heavy curtains, a door painted green, and a brass knocker. The colourful language here jumps out at the narrator, bright, green, ginger, and is a far cry from the descriptions of other houses as rags of ancient curtains, fresh painted and spotless as the false fronts of a theatre backdrop. The last simile there shows how sterile and dead the rest of the neighbourhood feels compared to Fanny's house, which is full of life with pots of geranium and an enormous striped ginger cat. The adjective enormous shows that the cat is well fed and healthy, which adds to the lively atmosphere of the entrance. What do you make of this response? Discuss in class or independently. Yes, it's pause time. Goodness gracious me, once again this pupil has included quotations from outside of lines 6 to 19. Naughty! These quotations and related comments therefore need to go. This is what we are left with, and of course I've had to rewrite a few sentence openers so that it makes sense as a whole. On the positive side, quotations have been embedded naturally, and I quite like the way different quotations have been grouped together to point out the colourful vibrancy of Fanny's house. That said, Ginger does relate to the cat rather than the house itself and might arguably be seen as a less convincing addition. Moreover, I wonder A, how true it is that the cat is healthy, and B, how relevant it is to the question. In the next paragraph, we learn that the big tabby rolled her boneless weight silently into the hall. Does this imply healthiness, or possibly that the wretched creature is grossly overweight and shapeless? So, we need to make some improvements here. I'd be tempted to do some work developing the point about flowers. This pupil grouped the colours So why not group the quotations about the flowers? For instance, unusual for the vicinity, Fanny's house is full of life, with pots of geranium outside and great vases of flowers, crimson, purple and gold, on stands in every corner inside. What is noticeable here is the quantity and vibrancy of the flowers both inside and outside the house. The geraniums outside are on all the sills, whilst the indoor vases are in every corner. The effect is an overwhelming burst of rich colour and life, with the colours being more associated with wealth and opulence than the dirt and grime you might expect from the street's exterior. Note that I use square brackets and replace them with flowers so that my sentence makes clearer sense. Note also the way I vary the way I begin my post-quotation analysis. Rather than repeatedly saying, this suggests that, I go for, what is notable here is, this is probably implicitly rewarded in the mark scheme rather than explicitly. And also note the way I ensure I come back to the question within the final sentence of the paragraph, rather than getting sidetracked by the bloody cat.
Now here's the paragraph from a third past pupil.
This pupil writes, in line 6, the beginning of the second paragraph of the extract, the narrator clearly states that Fanny's house was larger than the rest. Structuring this statement to be at the beginning of the paragraph immediately sets Fanny's house apart from the others around the area. The narrator elaborates, explaining that though Fanny's house is made of the same soot-grimed London stone, it is respectably clean. The adverb respectably emphasises the unusual status of the house in the area. This difference to the other houses is a positive one, making the house sound more appealing relative to the others. The house's unusualness is emphasised in the contrasting descriptions of the other houses. They are described as old, once very fine and fashionable. This is in sharp opposition to the well-kept house Fanny resides in. What do you make of this response? So discuss in class or think independently. It's pause time. We can see here in this paragraph that the pupil is kicking off with a structural point. And of course, there needs to be a balance of language and structure points across the response as a whole. We have the use of subject terminology and a focus on an individual word and what this suggests in relation to the question. But I wonder about the overall choice of quotations, at least within this paragraph. Are they as interesting as they could be? Might it have been more prudent to explore some of those more interesting and complex quotations in the second half of the extracts? However, Fanny's house isn't just larger, but also has a special, enchanting atmosphere within. Effie feels as though she has been magically transported to some Aladdin's cave. This conjures up exotic images of Middle Eastern culture and glorious opulence, whilst the past participle transported implies the suddenness of the transition from grubby grime to fairy tale-esque charm. It's worth stressing that detailed analysis doesn't necessarily need to spill out into 2 or 3 sentences. There is a huge amount of concise analysis packed into this final single sentence, which unpicks both the phrase magically transported and the image of Aladdin's cave. Time now for my response. The passage is structured so that it slowly reveals more and more interesting ways in which Fanny's house is unusual. Initially, we learn the prosaic fact that it was larger than the rest, with a bright, clean door, before the writer describes the unusual smells inside, something like sandalwood and cinnamon and wood smoke. The use of polysyndeton stretches out the homely, comforting smells of wood, which is combined with a sweeter, citrusy smell. So even before any of the interior of the house is described, we get the impression that we are entering a very different environment, somewhere more exotic and warm. This impression develops further in the final paragraph when the writer reveals that being inside the house was like being magically transported to some Aladdin's cave. This is a reference to the story in the Arabian Nights, when the hero Aladdin is tricked into entering a cave containing fabulous riches. The impression, therefore, is of slight claustrophobia and of being surrounded by glittering and unexpectedly lavish colours and beauty, as confirmed in the previous paragraph in the references to crimson, purple and gold flowers. The adverb magically confirms just how unexpected this is. The street as a whole is built with the same soot-grimed London stone. Note the depressing, sticky sibilance. And such a change is so extraordinary that it feels as though it can only have been conjured up by benign, supernatural forces. The impression of a bizarrely intimate and exotic house is furthered by the description of the cat as sphinx-like. A sphinx was an ancient creature from Greek mythology with a woman's head and a lion's body. Thus, this hyphenated simile draws attention to the hybrid nature of the house as a whole. On the outside it seems normal, a woman's head, yet within it is wildly different and curiously, dangerously exciting, a lion's body. Yet these creatures are resting before the fire, and so there is also a sense of calm and peace within the house, something confirmed by the description as the drawing room as cosy. This seems at odds within a street in which some houses are clearly in a terrible state of repair and abandonment. Some reflections. Note the focus on structure within my first paragraph. I point out that it is structured so as to slowly reveal details about the unusual nature of the interior of the house, with smell coming before sight. If an interesting, more complex word or image has been used, don't be afraid to define it. This can help make your analysis more specific and insightful. Note the level of detail I go into when exploring the adverb magically. The change feels so extraordinary that in some ways we get a sense that it can only have been conjured up by benign, supernatural forces. If there is a simile in the extract which is relevant to the question, then by God, comment on it. But avoid oversimplification. Yes, the house seems exotic, but it is also a place of peace, as I confirm as I explore the effect of the verb rested and the adjective cosy. The mark scheme includes some possible points. These are only suggested ideas, and of course the examiner will use the grids to make an overall judgment as to whether the insight into language and structure is sophisticated, level 6, 11 to 12 marks, perceptive, level 5, 9 to 10 marks, developed, level 4, 7 to 8 marks, or clear, level 3, 5 to 6 marks. So press pause now if you'd like to read and possibly discuss these indicative content suggestions.
This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production, inching you towards full marks within paper 2, question 3. Many thanks for watching.